Alright, you beautiful peoples of the internet, Glyn here, and we got a little review and product testing of the TESmart HDMI splitter. I'll be going over to unbox this in a minute, and just before we get into things, then I would like to say I was sent this product to review and test, which I have done, and links to the product will be in the description somewhere, wherever the description is. It's usually below somewhere. Okay, so if you want to fancy getting yourself one of these, just click the link in the product for the product in the description below. Okay, with that done, let's roll the intro and then we'll get into the unboxing. Beautiful people of the internet, today we got a new product that's released on the market, a 4K HDR splitter. So I'm do the unboxing first. A simple white box, and inside you will find the instruction manual. Quite a well laid out instruction manual, got all the bits and pieces you need to know to how to work the product, although it's a very simple product to work. They also do a range of other switches, as you can see from the manual here. This is the 2-port one I'll be showing off today, but they do a 4-port, an 8-port and a 16-port. So you can have up to 16 monitors, depending on which model you buy. So here's the actual switch itself. It's in a lovely hard metal case. All the ports are on one side, and it does have its own power. So it does come with its own power supply plug. And it doesn't use a USB to power it, so you will need an extra socket somewhere to plug this in. So let's take a closer look at the actual switch itself. As you can see, it's made of a good solid strong metal construction, which I really like. I really like it when they're made out of metal. And there's the power supply port there. And then you'd go and plug that in, and that will provide you with the energy you need to run the unit. Right, so what is a HDMI splitter and what does it do? So essentially, as you can see from the little picture I've put up here, I have either a game console, it could be a Sky QHD box, it could be a PC, or any sort of device that outputs media, DVD player, etc, etc, CCTV, etc. It takes that input and then essentially splits it into two outputs, which you can then send to two separate televisions. So of course you can get this, the one I'm reviewing here is a 2-way splitter, as you can see in the picture. You can also get ones that do 4 ways, 16 ways, 8 ways, etc. So you'd probably have seen a 16-way splitter in action when you go to a local like television retailer, when they've got all the TVs up on the wall and they're all showing the same picture. Then they're using a device very similar to this to do that. So that is essentially what it does and how it works. Okay, so here's the TESmart splitter. Now I'm going to show you it how you would go about plugging things in. We go to the back here, and as you can see, there is one of the HDMI inputs is labelled quite clearly input. The other two are labelled output. They're also numbered 1 and 2. So the first thing you want to do is plug in your HDMI inputs and outputs. For this particular demonstration, I'm using good quality. Make sure that you do get good quality HDMI cables. The ones I'm currently using are 48, I believe they're 48 gigabytes. They're HDMI 2.1 compliant, but really you need HDMI, at least HDMI 2.0 compliant cables. They're not expensive, to be honest, but just make sure that if you're using very old HDMI cables, that HDR might not pass through, and also 4K might not pass through. But essentially HDMI 2.0 or above cables should be fine. So this is from my PlayStation 5. and that'll be going into the input. I now have two output sources. One is a 4K television and the other is a 4K compatible monitor, PC monitor. I'm just using those two as they're the two at hand that I can use to show you the product working. So the best quality output will be my 4K TV. I'm going to put that into output 1. I'll just check in here. And that's output 1 plugged in. Second monitor will go into output 2. And last but not least, powering on the device. And of course we just put the plug into the power, and as you can see now it's all lit up. The red light is the power light, the two blue lights indicate what function that the HDMI splitter is now working under. There's one where it'll come on, it'll just be one blue light on the left. There's also a blue light on the right, and then there's two blue lights together. For my particular outputs, I will be using the two blue lights together as they're both 4K compatible TVs and monitors. So we're going to move on, and I'm going to show you some screens of this actually working with an output from the PS5 going to both monitors at the same time. And I'll also show you that they're both receiving 4K 60Hz and HDR. So what are we looking at here? So on the screen on the left is a Samsung monitor, and on the screen on the right is the TV. So these essentially are the two outputs coming from the HDMI splitter. Now what I would like to point out is that if I show you the resolution on here, I might have to press it a couple of times. 3840 2160 at 60p, HDMI UHD color, HDR UHD. So that means it's 4K HDR 60 FPS coming from one of the outputs of the splitter. Now I'm going over to the Samsung monitor here. You can see my finger in the picture, and I will bring up information. If we look here, we're getting full 4K at 60Hz, and also just over there HDR is on. Just let that focus in. The camera will struggle to focus on that. There we go. So there's a nice clear picture. So essentially both at the same time, you can see now that I've proved that the HDMI splitter is more than capable of splitting a single HDR 60 frames a second 4K signal into two separate 4K 60 frames a second HDR signals. So that's proof of concept of the HDR box working as it should and as intended. Now I am going to go on and test this for capturing using an Elgato capture card and for displaying. So we'll have one television out and one capture card display. So I'll go on and do that next as well. But as proof of concept, this works fine for splitting off to two televisions. Right, so what we have here now is on the bottom left, below me here, I have a direct capture of the Elgato, and then if you look in the background, I'm actually filming the 4K television at the same time. So if you need to capture, split the signal to capture one to the telly and one to the Elgato, and you're using something like a PS5 or an Xbox, I believe Xbox HDCP is disabled by default, but on a PS5 you will need to disable HDCP. Essentially HDCP is a form of copyright protection, and it stops you copying videos, but you should be fine for capturing things like video gameplay. So I will show you that. I'll have to turn to look at the TV, but we need to go to settings. I'm just going to show that on this video, so if you are buying this Switch you know how to do it. So you need to go to the options at the bottom. It's not going to be very clear on here at the minute, but system, click on System. The next thing you'll see is HDMI. You need to click on that, and down here, enable HDCP. That will need to be turned off. Now I've currently got a app running. Do you want to continue? Yes, I do. So it'll close YouTube because YouTube will not allow you to record using HDCP off. So now, as you can see below me now, on this side, the screen below, that is the direct Elgato, and it is now capturing at 4K and 60 from the HDMI splitter on the Elgato as well. So we will just show that now. I'll quite possibly start it, and I'll just put on the screen. I don't know if you can read that from, unfortunately I've only got a fisheye camera lens to show that, but you can see there it's full 4K and 60, and the capture is also, I won't be able to show you unless I do an actual screen capture, but the Elgato is capturing at 4K 60 as well. So that is the TESmart HDMI splitter that is compatible with your Elgato at 4K and 60. So I'm going to go on now and test a couple of little features that I found that the Elgato can do, but isn't actually in any of the descriptions, and that is 120 frames a second. So we'll go on and we'll go and show you that proof of concept. So I'm going to try something slightly different here, and this is going to be pushing the TESmart HDMI splitter to try and run at 120 frames a second at 1080p. Now it's not designed for that, and it's not in any of the manual information that it can do it, but I have found it can work. Now you may need to reset the TESmart splitter to enable the mode, because sometimes it can glitch out, but it will work. So I'm going to show you here. I currently got a game called Doom Eternal running, which will run at 120 frames a second at 1080p on the PlayStation 5. So we're about to change to 120 FPS mode. Okay, so when I back out of this, both screens will go blank. Now, and normally they should return. Right, the TV's come back on and the Elgato's come back on. And just to prove you now that I am, if you look at the screen, 1920 by 1080, which is 1080p, on the Samsung it says 120p, which means it's now running at 120 frames a second. Also, the Elgato is also receiving the same signal, although it won't record at 120, it'll only record at 60, but that is how the Elgato works, and there's nothing to do with the quality of the output of the splitter. The splitter is doing 120 frames a second, and I would like also point out it's also doing HDR, so it's doing HDR at 120 frames a second, outputting through the HDMI splitter. And that is fantastic. That's great, because what that means is I can play games now, and if the game has 120 frames second mode, I can play and capture it. Or if it has a 4K mode, HDR mode, I can play and capture that. So all in all, results have been great. Anyway, we're going to go to a conclusion, and I'll move over to that. So we'll see you in a bit. Okay, so my conclusion overall of the TESmart HDMI splitter. Very, very good. Very, very good product. Unlike some other HDMI splitters, which I won't name, but I have had on my channel, there's no need to flick little switches to change output settings. This will change from one of them, the outputs from 4K to 1080p, and it'll do that automatically. You don't need to mess about flicking little switches and all that. It's functioned at 4K HDR flawlessly. It's also functioned at 1080p 120 FPS. Now, it wasn't flawlessly. I did have, will admit, I did have one or two little issues. I don't believe it's with the splitter. I believe it's to do with HDCP, and basically it's handshaking between the console, the box, and the Elgato. But a very simple solution. I just unplugged it plugged it back in with power, and everything sorted itself out within 1 or 2 seconds. So it wasn't a lot of like pulling out leads or anything. It was just a simple quick reset, and that only ever happened 1 or 2 times. Most of the time it did work flawlessly. So long as you're not changing resolutions continuously, I think even as at a 120 FPS switch, this is a great little product. So my personal use for one of these is 4K TV and the Elgato game capture. But of course you could be using this for something like you've got a Sky Q HD box and you want to split one up and send a long HDMI cable up to your TV upstairs to watch TV in bed. Brilliant product for you here. Again, it'll do it all automatically. You don't need to run downstairs and start flicking switches. This will do it all automatically. And of course, you don't need to have both outputs running out at the same time. You can just have the TV working, which is what I use it for the Elgato. Simply put, is that sometimes I just want to play my games console on my television. So I don't need to then unplug things from different places, like from the Elgato and from the PC. I can just leave them plugged into this. When I want to watch TV, it's coming out of this HDMI, and when I want to actually record capture, it'll come out of both HDMIs. So it's a great little product to solve what can be quite a complicated problem. So a simple solution to complicated problems, and that's what we like on this channel. So I'd like to thank TESmart for sending me this to have a look at. I'm very much pleased with it. I believe this is going to go and replace my old splitter that I was using as my new splitter, because this one is working a lot better. So there will be, there will be links down in the description below where one will take you to this particular splitter that they've sent, and also the other one will take you to the TESmart website where they have a range of other products. They do KVM switches, splitters, other HDMI source things, mostly to do with things like PCs and HDMI and audio and video outputs. So if you fancy one of those other products, then sure, pop on down and check the link in the description below. So I've been Glyn. This has been Cheapskate News and Tech Reviews, and I'm going to leave you with this one. Okay, thank you very much for your view. And of course, if you did enjoy and found this useful, do smash the old like button and consider a subscribe. Anyway, I'm out of here. Bye now.